Hey gamers, what's up? I just had the misfortune of reading a blog written by Willie Jefferson of the Houston Chronicle. He decided to speak out against racism in video games in a blog he titled Racism in Video Games, The New Norm. I want to dissect some of what he had to say. And since Willie is such a hero, I decided in this video that I would portray him as such. This is Willie J, conqueror of intolerance, or the race saint. I'm undecided. I've made him of indistinguishable race, so no one could question his supreme authority on racial injustice. God forbid anyone think a hero like Willie J would demonstrate any double standards or hypocrisy. And look at him. He's fighting mad. So in his blog, Willie says, I am disturbed by the growing trend of racist undertones that are cropping up in video games. One of the games that comes to mind is Left 4 Dead 2. Though the game isn't out yet, it's already causing an uproar. Set in New Orleans, players will have to fight their way through hordes of zombies, with several of them who appear to be African Americans. When I saw the first trailer for the game, all I could think about was Hurricane Katrina and the aftermath. Setting the game in a city that was the scene of dead, bloated bodies floating by so soon afterwards was a bad call, in my humble opinion. The city has had enough to deal with. Valve, you should have spared them, even if it's just a video game. So let me get this straight, Willie. If the game was made in Columbia, Atlanta, or Tallahassee, it would be okay. On the other hand, if a hurricane took place there, the game shouldn't have been made in that location? Even though the game has nothing to do with the disaster? Well, okay, that's fine, but in that case, games that take place in New York City shouldn't be made either, right? I mean, setting the game in a city that was the scene of terrorist attacks, people leaping to their deaths, burning and being crushed by millions of tons of rubble is deplorable, right? 9/11 was only 4 years prior to Katrina and over 1,000 more people died. But you never said the same about games made in the Big Apple. Why the double standard? If location can make a game racist, then why isn't the Jewish community in an uproar over games that take place in Germany? What does Hurricane Katrina and setting the game in New Orleans have to do with one another? And what do they have to do with racist undertones in video games? Nothing. You know, maybe you should stop overreacting as an African American and start reacting as an American. Even more so, maybe you should consider that we're all human. And the more you hold on to race as a factor in everything you do and see, the more you push tolerance out of the picture. Racial intolerance is a two-way street. Valve didn't make this game with any racist intent, nor did they make race a factor when they chose the game's characters and locale. Okay, Willie. So where is it okay to make games take place? You say, space is a safe place. Liberty City is an awesome place, but New Orleans or the Old South can be very, very touchy areas to deal with. Okay, so let me ask this. What about San Andreas? The fictional city where an African American protagonist shoots the hell out of civilians and law enforcement officials who are mostly white. I don't recall Caucasians in an uproar over that, outside of law enforcement officials, who both black and white ones were ticked off, and Jack Thompson, who doesn't matter anymore. But I wonder why the normal gamer wasn't so offended by that. Oh, that's right, because no one cares. But here's a great question. Why aren't you up in arms about games that criminalize African Americans and perpetuate negative stereotypes? That's far more offensive, if you ask me, to portray every person of color in that game as a mindless, thuggish, drug-dealing gangster criminal, whether the city is fictional or not. But I guess when the main character is in a position of power to take lives and defy the system, it's fine, no matter how he's portrayed. So why is there a double standard between racism and how a character is portrayed? And why is the place more a factor than the intentions of the characters in the game? The logic of people like Willie here is dubious at best. For example, Willie says, Another game, Resident Evil 5, puts gamers in the heart of Africa, blasting zombies. I'll bet you'll never guess what color they are. First of all, they aren't zombies. Let's get that straight. They're genetically altered people who are attacking and trying to kill the main characters in the game, who are fighting them in self-defense. And second, what would you expect? African villages full of Norwegians or Canadians? The game is anthropologically correct, and for the record, there are people of all colors in Resident Evil 5. I also think it's worth mentioning that in the 16 Resident Evil games made before Resident Evil 5, where you kill people from all over the world, from Alaska to Spain, I've never heard of a guy named Willie Jefferson complaining. But when it happens in Africa, it becomes a matter of race. Why? It's only racist if it was made with racist intent. And when Resident Evil 5 was made, that wasn't there. There was none. On top of that, the people in this game are heroes. They're saving the people of the villages, of the area, from the evils of the Umbrella Corporation. Heroes. And here's another question. If they made the indigenous people of the villages in Resident Evil 5 white, wouldn't you have still complained because the game was inaccurate and the developers failed to depict the people of the villages in a proper manner? Of course you would. That would be something to complain about. But let's move on. Willie also says, the game that really inspired this blog was Ubisoft's Call of Juarez, Bound in Blood. The game starts out with players assuming the role of Ray, a Confederate officer working to save his brother Thomas, who's pinned down by Union soldiers. I nearly dropped the controller. But Willie, that's crazy. You must have overlooked the fact that in many games you kill people from all ethnicities, depending on the region in which the game takes place and the time period and the conflict you're involved in. I know you have no intolerance in you whatsoever, Willie, so it must just be an oversight, right? Well, what else did you have to say? I cannot stand the Confederate flag. I resist the urge to burn everyone that I see. Whoa. Flag burning? Okay, let me read ahead a little bit. And to play a game where I don't have a choice to be on the leading side and one I detest made me wonder. You detest, huh? Well, maybe you are a little intolerant in your own way, Willie. In any game that involves a conflict between two groups of people, you're going to have a losing side, and a side that people think was in the wrong. To each side of the conflict, that's the other side. It may always be a touchy subject for that group of people or the other. To eliminate that, developers would have to make games that have completely fictional characters of indistinguishable ethnicity fighting battles that never happened on another planet. This way, no one in Japan or Germany, for example, would be offended while playing as an American shooting Germans and Japanese during World War II. That is, unless you can't relate to that. Let's see what Willie has to say on the subject. And shooting Union soldiers just made me pause the game and walk away for a few minutes. As a minority, let's skip ahead a little more. I'm sure that's just a coincidence. No double standards here. Not from you, Willie. Let's see. A little further ahead you said, I don't have a problem blasting Nazis in Call of Duty and Medal of Honor. I don't have a problem. Wait, whoa. What did you just say? You have a problem with this, but you don't have a problem with that. Okay, Willie, I'm just going to say it. You're what we commonly refer to as a hypocrite. Do you think you're the only person in the world whose people were wronged? You say, granted, Ubisoft is a French-owned company, but to this day, the Civil War is still a very, very touchy subject. You also say, as much as I enjoy video games, I do not like having to play a part of history that I would like to forget and avoid but can't. Well, how about the American Indians? When Gun came out, I didn't hear you complaining. But the slaughter of their people isn't a touchy subject? And consider this very valid point. The Civil War ended 144 years ago. Let it go. You weren't there. No one you know was there. Hell, man, World War II was only 64 years ago. There are still people living who were there, who suffered through it. There are survivors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki alive today, and I have yet to hear the uproar of the Japanese over the myriad of World War II shooters, and Japan is one of the world's largest game markets. You say, Hurricane Katrina is a very touchy subject, and video game makers should do more research about historical events before putting them into video games. What? How do you know how much research goes into a game? And who are you anyway? Are you the only person whose feelings matter? Or is it because you're somehow more sensitive than anyone else? What makes you so special, Willie? You also say, it's okay to have a Western video game with enemies of all shades. You don't have to go back to the Civil War to give the characters depth. Let the story tell who the characters are. Time, place, and conflict happen to be the basis of the stories for many games. They are the story. But I guess to please Willie, we should limit the scope of content we can use in video games to only that which doesn't offend every overly sensitive, hypocritical moron like Willie Jefferson. Come on, developers, let's create characters and stories that no one can relate to, scenarios that people can't identify with. Or in this case, we can make games in which we kill Caucasians, Asians, Indians, Germans, Spaniards, Russians, Europeans, aliens, animals, insects, but you can't kill an African or an African American because then it becomes racist. Hey, you know what, Willie? Would you like it if we only made games that were approved of by every single person on the planet? That's a good idea, huh? But if that were the case, I guess game production would stop in its tracks and no game would ever be made again. I have a better idea. You can lead the IGSRC, the Indigenous and Genealogical Software Rating Committee. They can tell us if a game is offensive to specific cultures. This game is rated RB for racial bias. How's that sound? No, you know what? Look, I'm joking, folks. This is sarcasm. Forget I said that because people like Willie would really take me seriously and want to see this happen. And before too long, every game case you buy, it'll just be covered in warnings and ratings from different people, and there'll be a tiny little spot up on the corner with the name of the game and the system you can play it on. Maybe a little tiny picture on the back. Let me just wrap this up. Here's how it really is. I'm sick and tired of selfish, self-serving, self-important, overly sensitive morons who speak out against video games that offend them in such a hypocritical and thoughtless manner. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who feels this way. Folks like Willie Jefferson need to stop bitching about the color of people in games and start having fun playing them like everyone else in the world. Because the more you make an issue of race and color, the more you make race and color an issue. We're all people. We're all the same. Intolerance, idiocy, ignorance, they're all human traits and cannot be attached to any single race of people. When you point out something and label it racist, you give it power, and that perpetuates the entire cycle. If you don't like something, then ignore it. And who knows, Willie? Maybe if you stop making such a big issue of race, it'll stop becoming one at all. Then we won't need heroes anymore.